generational wealth. Generational wealth. Generational wealth. What is generational wealth? We asked our communities, and this is what they had to say.
Generational wealth is having financial security and not having to worry about it for yourself, your immediate family, and future generations. It's a very elusive idea to me personally, because it's not something in my immediate experience, and it's only something that I'm learning about a little bit more in theory and knowing or trying to know if that's like a real possibility for someone like me.
This campaign to create awareness to generational wealth is brought to you by the Department of Neighborhood's Generational Wealth Initiative, the Washington Housing Finance Commission, and Rainier Avenue Radio World. Create your generational wealth for you and the future of your families.
Different rules apply when it gets this late, you know what I mean? It's like after hours.
Whatever gets you through the night.
Hello, I'm an unpaid spokesman for DJ Sotovaci. I'd like to invite you to listen to his free-form music show. It's popular music the way it was never intended to be heard. Whatever gets you through the night, late nights, here on Rainier Avenue Radio World.
Whatever gets you through the night.
This is Big Poppy, host of Jazz from the Cabinets. Join me each week for a listening tour of the first century of jazz, an eclectic mix of Dixieland, big band, cool jazz, bebop, contemporary jazz, world jazz, all jazz in all forms. That's Jazz from the Cabinets with Big Poppy on Rainier Avenue Radio, streaming worldwide on RainierAvenueRadio.world.
Dealing with COVID-19 is uncharted territory, and everyone has different challenges. People may feel anxious, down, or overwhelmed. For some, these feelings can lead to changes in sleep patterns, an increased use of alcohol or drugs, or withdrawing from the people around them. If you know someone who's having a hard time coping, you can help by reaching out to talk and listen. To learn more about how you can help someone in need, call the Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-TALK. Brought to you by the state of Washington.
I'm Paul Pearson, host of Star Time, and when I'm not rehearsing my annual address to shareholders, I'm listening to Rainier Avenue Radio World.
Year's events in 3 hours. Yeah, I've got about money, Toller. Juan, Cotto, touching bases with you, with Justin Kesterson this week from the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio World. And it is a strange sight here in the palatial studios down here on Rainier Avenue. We have sunshine coming through the windows, and that means that spring is just around the corner. I believe we have passed through the the spring solstice or the vernal equinox, or we have to bring in one of those scientific professors on YouTube to come and explain to me which equinox this is. But this is the one that equals spring, and I believe we are into the second week of spring, if I'm not mistaken, or whatever the timing was on that. But certainly we are seeing some sun here. Justin reminded me that in the first day of spring turnouts, we had snow here in the greater Puget Sound area. So, this hopefully will be a pleasant hope of things to come. Of course, we have opening day of the Seattle Mariners baseball season on Thursday. Understand that it will be a closed roof down at T-Mobile Park. And so the weather will return, but it's going to be a lot of fun. And always having Justin here is a lot of fun with us. Mick Hoffman, who is usually in this chair, he has been working on some different projects, so he can't be here this week. Hopefully he will be here next week and we'll continue this conversation. But one of his very, very able lieutenants. And refresh us, Justin, what you do at the WIAA.
Yeah, no, first off, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's always fun getting to do this. But I'm one of the 4 assistant executive directors in the office. I oversee cross-country wrestling and track and field are my primary sports. And then I oversee eligibility, medical advisory committee, and a few other things. So stay busy. If
I'm not looking at you, it's okay. The sun's in my eyes. And always trying to maintain our light balance here. We're going to talk about a couple of different things here today. We're going to talk about athletic eligibility and participation. We're going to talk about academics eligibility and what you need to do to be able to participate in athletics and athletics and how that kind of comes across. Then, of course, we're going to talk about career opportunities in high school athletics, and we'll throw some questions, and they will all be nice batting practice fastballs, which Justin will hit out of the park. But the first thing let's talk about the Matt Classic. You were involved in that, and tell us how that went down in Tacoma and what a special event that is every year.
Another great event this year. Matt Classic 35 this year, and so big celebration there with just another year under our belt.
Wow.
Of a huge event, one of the largest tournaments in the country. 24 mats right down on the Tacoma Dome surface, so it's quite the spectacle to see. But we just continue to grow. The sport of wrestling across the state continues to grow. We're back up over 10,000 participants on the boys' side. We had about
10,000 wrestlers in the state of Washington.
Yeah, that's just the boys' side, and
wow,
we're up over 3,000 girls now wrestling.
So 13,000 kids wrestling.
Yeah, it's growing leaps and bounds, and we had a setback in COVID, obviously, and we were worried with that sport particularly about the turnout the following year, and it's just continued to grow and grow and grow. And again, like I said, our girls' numbers are up almost 700 girls this year.
Now, I saw a recent commercial in the NFL, and maybe it was one of those commercials that was generated off of one of the social media platforms, but it had Ray Lewis and a couple of other football athletes, and it also featured the head coach of the Buffalo Bills, whose name's escaping me right now. So, but nevertheless, is it Coach McDermott?
Yep.
They were, and I guess McDermott never lost a wrestling match in high school. He was undefeated.
Yeah.
But they were all these guys were talking about their unbelievable wrestling careers. And they were encouraging young football athletes, but certainly athletes of any sport to wrestle, simply because you learn more about leverage and obviously the unbelievable condition you're in. Tell us what is generating this interest in the sport right now.
Yeah, so I think it's a good question. I think one of the things that's led to it really is just the growth of the sport across the country. The focus, a couple of years ago on the Stanford men's program, when Stanford had cut the men's wrestling program down there, and the campaign behind that to keep wrestling going at Stanford. Obviously, it rejuvenated it. Stanford committed to bring the team back, and so now they're back on their feet. And I think overall, just the push behind girls wrestling has really kind of drawn a focus to the sport once again. And it's a great sport. You get a lot of kids out there. It's nice, right? You're working. You're constantly moving, right? It's a sport that has you constantly on your feet and constantly moving around on the ground. And it's great to put your kids into, right? Get the energy out of them. I've got my son in wrestling, gets him exhausted every night we have practices. So, and really it's something that builds a community. Everybody always talks about the wrestling group in high schools, and sometimes they can be a quirky bunch, but it's great because their sense of camaraderie, the sense of team, and the sense of community within that sport around the school is great to watch. And you see it at Matt Classic every year with the number of people that we have show up for the event.
With all of the millions of dollars in these athletic departments in these Power 5 schools, it's amazing. The University of Washington recently cut swimming, and now you hear about Stanford. California was dangerously close to cutting baseball about a decade ago, and I think it was Jeff Kent, the Major League second baseman and borderline Hall of Famer. He gave a couple of $1 million as a gift and as an endowment to keep the baseball program going. And it's just really good to see that some of these non-revenue sports, and you would think that wrestling would be the kind of sport that would attract revenue. Obviously, football and basketball have cornered the market on that for obvious reasons. But it's good to hear that they were able to save these programs and it's generating a little bit of support.
Yeah, and I mean, I think to go back to that last question, right? The growth of the sport, right, is the focus that ESPN's put on, the national championship, which the Division I tournament was just this past weekend, and I mean, the views continue to go up. The attendance is always healthy at nationals, and then just the push behind USA Wrestling and the Olympic focus have really helped to push that sport along, I think.
Well, that was good. And tell us, were there any special performances or any special performers that stuck out down in Tacoma?
Yeah, we had a number of kids that were going. Obviously, with the COVID interruption, we didn't have any chances at a 4-time state champion, but we had 3-time state champions coming back. We had one kid from I believe it was Sumner that came up and went undefeated his entire career,
Wow.
right, and finished his career undefeated. Through high school, we had a number of kids that come back that are top ranked across the country that were able to defend their state championships and win another one this year. So the talent level in Washington has been exceptional, and we continue to see just better and better performances every year, and the number of kids that are coming back and competing that are some of the top tier wrestlers in the country. So
Special sport, obviously one of tremendous condition and endurance, tremendous mental fortitude. You have to be tough mentally, physically to be a wrestler. And then also, I mean, the coaches and some of these small communities that support wrestling are so passionate about it. It's a sport that seems like people just love.
Yeah, no, the sport's great, and we've got a great coaches association that we work with in the office around the sport and the tournament, and then just the community as a whole, right? I mean, we get emails and stuff because people care, right? They're passionate about their teams and the qualifying process and what that looks like, and we're looking at a format change for next year that's going to continue to grow the tournament and what that looks like. So we've got a lot of people interested in the sport right now in the state and what it's going to look like as we move forward.
How many mats do they have on the floor?
Yeah, we got 24 mats down on the floor every
Spectacle.
year. Yeah,
It's a spectacle every year.
It's a lot.
And if you haven't had a chance and an opportunity to go to the Mat Classic down in Tacoma, go to www.wiaa.org. That's .org, correct? .com. They were .com. WIAA.com. Find out next year when Mat Classic is. Okay, so you kind of just make a note in your tickler file for those who remember tickler files. But you definitely want to do that next year because it is a spectacle to see the mats down there, the sheer energy and passion of all the folks that support wrestling. And it's one of the unique events, I believe, in the country, simply because with the way we do it here in the state of Washington, it is a fun and exciting event. So hope you get a chance to see that. We're going to talk a little bit about the eligibility and issues from an academic standpoint and an athletic standpoint, what a student has to do to be eligible to participate in sports. And this obviously will attract some questions. And usually when Mick and I talk about these types of topics, it's amazing because we actually get questions from the audience. And certainly we get questions when people actually watch the views of it, and we get follow-ups, and I'll get emails from people who will have questions that they want. So this will be really, really interesting to see if anyone reaches out today, if they're paying attention to this. But these are the things that we want to talk about because it's important to understand what an athlete needs to do to be eligible. And why don't you going to take us through that? What are the eligibility requirements for student athletes to participate in high school athletics in Washington State? And how are these requirements enforced?
Yeah, no, great questions. Obviously, not a popular topic, right? But no, this is
depends upon who you're speaking to.
Yeah, no, this is probably one of the primary focuses of my job. Really, is being part of the eligibility team in the office, and there's a section 18 of our handbook is the entire eligibility process, and the rules and the regulations around that. And so, some of those primary areas are the academics and scholarship, right? Are kids enrolled in the appropriate number of classes in order to be a full-time student? If they're running START, are they in those appropriate number of classes and balancing that out? And then you have to take a look at if they transferred in, and what those rules are, and whether students are eligible or not eligible based on how they transferred in, right? Did they have a full family unit move? Are they just transferring over from one school to another? Are they accessing an alternative public school? Are they at a private school and transferring to a public school? All of those things are encompassed in there. And I think the biggest thing to keep in mind when you're looking at eligibility is the students and the families have to meet each part of the eligibility process, not just one specific rule that they have to meet. They have to meet the entire process in order to be deemed eligible, whether that be at the school level, because the athletic directors determine initial eligibility to start with, And then if they're denied or if they're deemed to be ineligible, then they have an appeal process, right? Every student and family has the right to an appeal through our handbook in almost every situation. And then once they go to the district level for an appeal process, and if they're denied there, then they have the ability to come to the state and for one last appeal, and then they get heard there as well. So.
And what is the snag? Okay, and let's talk about the initial eligibility process. As the student comes from a school, let's say there's a transfer from a public school to a public school, a private school to a public school to a private school. What is the requirements there, and what usually is the hang up? Because we hear all these rumors and so forth, and kind of pull that out for us, dig it out.
Yeah.
Is there a process where they have to meet with the Sea King district to find out if they can participate in that sport once they transfer?
Yeah, no, it was a great question. So I used to be an athletic director, right? And so part of my routine, right, is that anytime that I've got a new student that comes into the school and they enroll, this is where, when I've been here before, we've talked about those relationships that you have to build within the school as an athletic director. And one of those is with your registrar, and the others are with the counselors, because anytime they are talking to a new prospective student or a new family that has enrolled, right, one of those first conversations, are you interested in sports? Do you think you'll ever participate in sports while you're here? Yes? Okay, great. I want to introduce you to our athletic director. And then there's the AD, right? Part of your responsibility is to determine a kid's initial eligibility. So you want to sit down, you want to have that conversation with a kid. Okay, tell me about yourself. And then we have forms. Over the last 5 years since I've been in the office, we've done a lot of work to increase our paperwork to basically help ADs, right? Not increase it to make it more difficult, right? It's to increase it to make sure that we're getting the entire story from families to help the ADs actually determine whether a kid is eligible or not from the get-go, right? If we can keep them out of the eligibility process and going to a hearing, great, as long as they're meeting all of those rules. And so one of the things that, as you're coming in and you have them fill out the paperwork, you're looking at that transfer. How did you get here, right? If you're coming in from a private school, one of the biggest things to remember is a private school radius is 50 miles, right, around the school. So in Seattle, right, that 50 mile is pretty expansive.
It's big.
Exactly. And it incorporates a lot of neighborhoods, a lot of other schools that are associated with that. Meanwhile, you go over to Spokane and you're at Gonzaga Prep, that 50 miles, there's not a lot of other schools that are in that like over here. And so you look at that 50-mile radius, and did the family move in or out of that 50-mile radius is one of the things that would determine your eligibility. If you're moving within that 50-mile radius, a rule was passed a couple of years ago by our legislative body that basically said if you're still within that 50-mile radius, your athletic eligibility stays at the private school that you were at. Public school, you have a full family unit move, you're okay, and you can go to another public school, or you could transfer into a private school as long as you have that full family unit move. But once you've been at a private school and you've made that move, you're beholden to that 50-mile radius at a private school. And so that can be kind of one of those snag areas where families don't fully understand the private school piece and the 50-mile radius and how that keeps their eligibility at a private school. Another thing that we look at is the window of transfer rule that's just went into place 2 years ago. Every eighth grade, anybody transferring from their 8th to their 9th grade year into a school basically has a school of choice. They can make a determination to go anywhere that they want to enroll, and they would have varsity eligibility right from the get-go. After they enroll in high school in their 9th grade year, typically, then any move after that, you're subject to the transfer rules and you have to meet all the criteria. So, but I think, the public or the private to the public, or the private to the private, is that 50-mile radius that a lot of families aren't aware of initially, or that they forget and they get kind of hung up on.
I've attended games where the parents who are sitting in the stands are accusing the other team of quote unquote recruiting, or they're letting kids in specifically to play the sport, and these kids are coming from here and these kids are coming from here. What processes are in place if a parent believes that? What can they do?
Yeah. Well, the primary thing from our office is we work with the schools. And so if people believe that another school is violating the rules, there's a process to go through their AD, and the AD can fill out a suspected violation form that a school is not following the rules. and then that actually triggers an investigation. Now, with that said, the investigation has to be done by the school that is being accused of cheating, and so we are a self-governing organization. So part of that is that our office doesn't have an investigative arm in it, so schools are required to kind of self-govern and keep themselves in check. And so that's what the leagues and the WIAA districts are there to help do as well. But that form gets sent to the school that is being accused of that, and we touch base with them and give them their next steps, which is to conduct an investigation and then report back.
I am Juan Cotto. I am a regular voice here on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world. This is Justin Kesterson. He is one of the assistant athletic directors, associate athletic directors? Assistant. Okay, assistant is supposed to associate, because at the associate level, that's at the university level, and we don't want to confuse that. And the University of Washington just hired Pat Chung today to come in, and we are all familiar with him here in the Washington area. Another guy who's been good to the communities, and he's also supported high school athletics, and he obviously will not be making the trip to whatever conference Washington State is going to, and I still will be outspoken. It's a shame that we don't have the Pac-12 anymore, but nevertheless, an athletic director that we are familiar with, and he will hire his own associates down at the University of Washington. Maybe just someday we will have Mr. Chun come in, and we'll have a conversation with him on high school athletics on WIAA Primetime, usually with Mick Hoffman, but with the very, very knowledgeable and talented Justin Kesterson today. Can you discuss the role of athletic clearance process in ensuring the eligibility and safety of student athletes before participating in sports activities?
Yeah, and so like I said, right, the athletic director determines that initial eligibility. One of the things that they're looking at is to make sure that every student has a valid physical, right? And so our handbook says that physicals are good for every 2 years, 24 months, excuse me. And but some school districts might be more restrictive and say you have to do that annually. So the athletic directors need to check that and make sure that they have the physical and a doctor is signed off that they're cleared and ready to and able to participate. And then, they're also checking out, like I said, the additional paperwork and making sure that they work with their athletic trainers. A lot of athletic directors and school districts have moved into some type of baseline testing to do for concussions and making sure that their students at least establish a baseline so that they have something to compare that to. And we're always, glad to see that the school districts are taking some of those extra precautions for student safety as it goes, because that is vital, right? When a kid's coming back from a concussion, to have that baseline really helps out the medical professionals to kind of understand what quote unquote normal is for that particular student, rather than just trying to eyeball it and do a battery of other tests. They have something tangible that they can go off of to know when it's safe for that kid to return back from an injury like that. So those are kind of the primary things that from a safety standpoint that the athletic director is going to look at. And then obviously they're going to make sure that the parents are on board and they sign off on all the parent forms and stuff as part of the registration process before they actually step foot out onto the court or the field.
For all of those that are trying to get a hold of me right now, I am not answering the phone. I am currently in the middle of a radio broadcast, so please wait till 4 o'clock to call me. Thank you. That's a joke, by the way. Let's talk about just in regards to the academic eligibility. And at O'Day High School in the early 1980s or whatever it was quite a while ago. I remember being academically ineligible, and I had a 2.46 GPA. And at O'Day, you had to have a 2.6 GPA to play. And I was upset about it. And I said, geez, at the public schools, they have a 2.0 GPA. And they said, the O'Day men have to do better. So you have to, if you're going to be out there, you have to have your grades at almost a B level. And to be honest with you, I'm glad that they did. I'm glad that they pushed us to that level. And something that wasn't much more work, just a little bit of application, looking back on it over 40 years' time. I know a number of school districts that have a 2.0 GPA. I've heard some that were a few years ago trying to go with a 1.0 or 1.5 GPA to get kids out there and engage with their classmates. And I'm not sure what's happened since the pandemic. And obviously, after that situation, we all know and understand the role and importance of athletics now. We want kids participating. Tell us about the academic load. Tell us about kids who are maybe struggling academically, like I was many years ago. And tell us, how do we make the academics work for the kids?
Yeah, and so we have a scholarship rule, right? Students have to be passing at least 5 of 6 or 6 of 7, whatever the class schedule looks like for that school, right? We have you can fail one class and still be eligible. Now, typically, like you said, most school districts have a 2.0 GPA requirement. Some might have something a little bit more restrictive, but we, from the association standpoint, require that you pass at least all but one of your classes in order to be eligible, and you're maintaining that as it goes, right? So it's where grade checks become important, a part of the process to make sure the kids are keeping up on their academics and they're staying eligible as the season goes along. So that's another thing that the athletic director is doing as part of that eligibility process, is ensuring that students have a previous semester logged into the transcript, and that they have the current course load is meeting all of those requirements that we have from a scholarship perspective. And then as you go throughout the season, that they're meeting and maintaining those standards as we go along. So yeah, I mean, and it's one of those things that we get phone calls and emails on, occasionally from parents asking about the requirements that their school district might have a more stricter policy in place, similar to what you experienced, right? There might be a 2.5 GPA requirement, and that's a local school district decision. You can't be less restrictive, but you can be more restrictive than WIAA rules.
Do you find that the kids, or do we find that the kids, do they come more accountable to what the district GPA is? If you make it a 2.6, I mean, I threatened the Highline kids to make it 3.0 to participate, and the GPA almost went up a full half point, and we had no kids under 2.0. I mean, they were that committed to trying to get a B average. Do the kids respond to it, do you think, or how does that kind of fit into place?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think that it depends on the systems that you have in place, right? Like, do you have tutoring available? Are you doing study halls and stuff before practices or after practices to help give those kids that extra support level? I think that sometimes you might set those systems in place, but then the kids don't have that support where they actually really are struggling. Because some of it is just, I mean, they're high school kids, right? They've got busy lives. They got a lot of things going on. They get distracted sometimes very easily. And so they're not always focused when they're in class. And so sometimes it's just an effort thing, right? But there are kids that truly, truly struggle with their schoolwork. And so you have to have those support systems in place for them to be able to help them along. And so I think that, yes, kids want to do their best. They want to succeed and they want to meet those that criteria. But as a coach or as an athletic director, if you're going to set that across all of your programs, you have to make sure that you have systems in place to help the kids.
The most recently, in looking at different situations, there was a very, very unfortunate and tragic shooting situation up near Garfield High School at their community center, and obviously that throws the community into a flux, and we're starting to wonder why and where are kids getting these weapons, and what would create the tension for a young person to shoot at the other young person. It's just such a unfortunate situation when it occurs, and it impacts an entire community. And I'm just wondering, are there exceptions, particularly if kids are really struggling after something like that occurs in their building or in their area?
Yeah. That's one of those things where we really try to work with the local school and the school district in kind of what's going on in their community. We get reached out to about, well, we want to look at potentially transferring our student athlete. While we understand that, right, that hardship is not unique to just that student. It affects the entire school and that community. And so, that can be where it's difficult in the hardship process, is you have to weigh the balances, because then if every kid transfers out of that school has no athletic programs left. And then all those kids are trying to find a home and replacing another kid. So, we look at the overall effects of does that situation affect just that student, or does it affect the entire community? Now, in terms of their grades and things like that, school districts have the ability to kind of manage those things and what systems they put in place. So there might be a reprieve on part of the grades during that stretch, right? Because those kids are going through obviously a very trauma-filled experience. And so that might be something that school and that school district looks at, right, on how they're managing that and what they're doing with their grades. And the schools have the latitude to do that, right? But it has to be done for all students, right, when they're looking at that. And we saw that during COVID, right? There was a lot of flexibility in how grades were being counted and how they were going to manage that. Basically, what we told the school is you still have to be compliant with WIAA rules. Whatever that looks like, you still have to monitor grades. They still have to be passing these classes. What that looks like, though, is a local decision, and it's up to each school.
He is Justin Kesterson. I am Juan Cotto in the sun on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world. We're talking eligibility for athletes. We're going to come back after a couple of minutes on your Rainier Avenue Radio.
Rainier Avenue Radio, your community radio station will provide you with more information. Rainier Avenue Radio.
Love food? Here's some storage tips to keep it fresh longer. Store cut fruits and vegetables in the fridge. Place in reusable containers. Keep bread in the freezer for longer storage. 40% of food in the U.S. goes uneaten. Save money, save food, save the planet. Visit Seattle Public Utilities for more tips.
Join Rainier Avenue Radio from 5 to midnight for Sunday evening sound sessions. Jazz from the cabinets from Big Poppy.
That's right. It's time once again for Jazz from the Cabinets.
Sergio LaCour's Love Line.
It's Sergio's Love Lines with Sergio LaCour. Go to the phone line. Tell her who we talking to.
Sage Prince and Just My Opinion.
This is Sage, and that's just about going to do it for the first half of Just My Opinion.
K-Fox Night Beat with Nasty Nets Rodriguez.
The beat of the Fox. K-Fox Night Beat, Nasty Nets.
You know what? You're going to listen from 5 to midnight. Just turn it on and don't stop. DJ Alibaba. The Underground Surround Sound Start Time. Paul Pinch.
Tuning in. My name is Paul Pearson.
Sunday evening sound sessions on Rainier Avenue Radio. Trust me, you'll be listening the entire time from 5 to midnight. Sunday evening, your sound session on Rainier Avenue Radio.
1, 2, get down. What's up, big and little homies? This is Masvita Maraire, host of Seattle Sports Weekly on Rainier Avenue Radio.world, your one-stop shop for Seattle sports. We cover preps, we cover college, we cover pro, we cover it all. Huskies, Mariners, Seahawks, Garfield, South, Roosevelt, Metro, King County. This is where you want to listen to for all the sports that's happening in Seattle. Seattle Sports Weekly on Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
Support for Rainier Avenue Radio comes from Cascade PBS, presenting season 2 of Out and Back with Allison Mariella Desir. Join Allison as she explores the Pacific Northwest with changemakers who are reclaiming space in the outdoors and creating opportunities for local BIPOC communities to engage with nature and find joy and healing. It's available now on Cascade PBS app and airing on KCTS 9 Thursdays at 8:50 p.m.
Rainier Avenue Radio. Seattle's best music, talk, and sports station.
The thing is, I mean, that's how life is, right? You go ahead and prank and you do it. We are back on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Juan Cotto, Justin Kesterson here. Justin, the Assistant Athletic Director at the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association, and so knowledgeable and has been around. A young man who has just been involved in sports. What drove you? Tell us a little bit about how you got involved in this game.
Yeah, well, it goes back a long way. So I started off as a sports information director at the college level, and so I was living in Billings in Montana, and so my wife and I had just gotten married, and that wasn't working out on a teaching career for her. So she moved back over here to Seattle and got in at Holy Rosary School in West Seattle and started working there. So our first year of marriage, we were living apart. That wasn't going to be ideal to keep that going. So I came back over here, and fortunately got into the Highline School District and began working at the high school level as the event manager over there, running things at the stadium, where you and I go back to, and then just kind of kept plugging along, working my way up the food chain there. And Terry McMahon, my former boss there, longtime administrator Terry. Terry was great in helping me and shaping me. And
up there in Bellingham. Hey,
that's
Terry.
right. That's right.
We know where you're at, Terry. I might drive up I-5 one of these days. Come mess with you.
And she helped push me along, right, and encouraged me to get involved more. And so she gave me the middle schools to kind of manage and lead the middle schools from an administrative side of things. And that really kind of fueled me to get more involved and become interested in becoming a high school AD. And so got lucky and worked my way into the athletic director position at Tyee High School, and did that for 3 years. And then 2 positions came open at the WIAA office, and I figured, that was my ultimate goal, was to get to the state level in doing this, and the timing just worked out, and I've been fortunate enough to get hired on and have been there for the last 5 years.
People who are happy in life are pursuing the areas in which make them happy, and I've met a lot of people who they work in the financial industry and they make a lot of money. They're not happy. Yeah. I've met people who are in sales and they make a lot of money, but they're not happy. Think about my own life. I'm thinking about friends of mine and thinking about friends of mine who are, I see on social media and the things that they post and how much they love sports. And you're one of the few people who I know you get to do what let's just take the money out of the positions that we're talking about. Let's forget money. Yeah. You're working in sports, man. That's pretty dang cool.
Yeah, it's like I said, very fortunate to do what I've done in my entire career, right? Whether that be at the high school level, the college level, getting an intern with the Mariners for a season, all of those things. I've been really blessed with being able to do that. And they always say you don't work if you love what you're doing, right? And that's so true. The days can be long, right? There's times where we all get frustrated in our jobs, and there's days where it can be a struggle sometimes going in, right? Because you just know you've got a tough decision to make, or you've got something that's going to come up. But I love it. We get to do some pretty fun things. We get to travel around the state. We get to talk to really awesome people and form relationships with some great coaches and some great administrators around the state. And then when it comes to our tournaments, to be able to go down and, for me especially, right, I've got 3 really large individual events that I do in cross country, wrestling, and track and field. So I get to kind of see the kids in their individual element achieve things that only a handful of kids get to claim as a state champion that year in those tournaments and those events. And so it's special to be able to do that, and then get to be involved at the basketball championships around the state and the football championship games and stuff. It's really, it's fun. It's no, I wouldn't change it.
What sport did you play in high school?
So I was a cross country runner. So I just ran in high school. Didn't run track. We talked about that earlier. I needed a place to go, so ran cross country, and this was back in West Virginia. And so enjoyed that. Did that for 4 years, and thought about going on to do it in college, but then I knew that I'd have to run indoor track and outdoor track, and that wasn't going to be my thing. So went off to Marshall University and didn't really have a plan for what I wanted to do, and then just kind of got involved in the athletic department there, and the rest is history.
Randy Marshall and We Are Marshall.
That's right. Randy Moss, Chad Pennington, Byron Leftwich. Oh yeah, good school.
What coach made the most impact on you? One of your coaches?
Oh, geez. Growing up, I think, my grandpa was a volunteer coach in our little league baseball team, so that was always memorable. And my uncle would coach me a number of times through that, and so learned a lot from them. Probably just my high school coach, right? It just he was good. We had a couple of coaches in our cross country team that really just made it fun and made an impact, right? And just kind of bringing together a team and what that looked like. So, yeah.
I love it. Justin Kesterson here on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world. We're talking sports. We're talking life. We are talking the eligibility process. And let's move over to academics. As we were touching on earlier, and you might have heard us as we were even coming in. How do schools support student athletes in balancing the academic commitments that they have in participating in athletic programs, ensuring that academic success is a priority?
Yeah, we touched on it earlier, right? Is the academic standards that we have within the handbook, right, of maintaining passing grades. So the required grade checks that schools are obligated to do by rule help ensure that the students are staying up on their academics and they're passing their classes in order to be eligible for competition. The support systems, right? That goes back to that communication with not only the registrar who's making sure that kids are in the school, but then with the counselors making sure that as they build their schedule, that they're helping the kids be in the most successful positions possible, right? And one of the things that they have to do as counselors is look at and manage the running start kids, the kids that are going and trying to take college credits, and balancing that out and making sure that the kids, it's the right fit for the kids. There's a lot of kids that end up trying running start, and then for whatever reason it doesn't work out. And so the counselors have to basically make sure that they are communicating with the athletic director, hey, this kid's struggling in this class, here's what we're going to do to try to help them out, and then start working through that process. And then making sure that you have those academic supports at the school, right? Working with tutors and working with some of those systems that are in place within the school system, working with the teachers and the staff at the school to really help those kids with their grades. But again, and then working with your coaches, right? It goes back to that, and coaches holding their kids accountable and making sure that they are staying up on their grades, and whether that's a study hall for everybody or a study hall if you're not meeting a certain threshold. And there's a lot of coaches out there that do their own grade checks outside of what the athletic department does in schools. And so there's a number of ways to keep the kids responsible for their grades and holding them accountable, but also providing that avenue of support for them.
Explain that a little bit, Justin, because when I was at Highline, I had to work with the teachers to set up a study hall. I used to get to the school around 3:45, so we can go into practice, roll into practice at 4 o'clock. That was about an hour and 15 minutes after school ended. I was able to find a couple of teachers who were able to stay up for 90 minutes. Yep. And I believe the district paid them. I believe they get an additional hour and a half of pay so they could run my study hall for me. And so I made it mandatory. For several parents, that was a really important thing. And we felt it was a good duty to make sure that we were helping the kids and get them motivated to stay on top of their grades. However, we understand that might not be the case for every school. How do the coaches and the schools maintain a, let's say, equitable way of setting up those study halls if they want to do them? Or is that something within each individual building?
Yeah, I would say it's within each individual building. I think when you're in a multi-school district, though, a lot of those systems can be kind of incorporated at all the buildings. But some of that just goes back to the staffing and what kind of a staff you have and what kind of culture you have inside of the school. So sometimes you can be limited in that. But as a school district, right, you want to try to support all of your schools the same and equitably along the way. And so as you're working with that, if you're at the district level, that's one of the conversations you're having with your building admin, not just your athletic directors, but your building principals of like, what can we do to help the students at each of your particular schools to make sure that they have success. And then that might be working with some of your community groups. When I was at Tyee, obviously we worked with the Boys and Girls, the Matt Griffin YMCA, where we had involvement there, and so kids might go up there to do study hall. We had other groups, AmeriCorps, that would come into our school, and they had tutoring services that were in place. And so the school district, though, forged a lot of those relationships and making sure that AmeriCorps folks were in each of our high schools to help with that process and to help out our counselors in those situations as well. So there's multiple ways to go about it and multiple looks for what that looks like in schools and school districts.
When I was growing up, and I remember I would watch the football games on Saturdays, and it seemed like this was particularly tied to football. They would have the academic All-American team. And I didn't know how to differentiate the academic All-American team from the All-American team. But what I found out was that you had to exceed a certain threshold for GPA to be on the academic All-American team. And I believe Steve Young and several other the quarterback from Brigham Young University, who had a Hall of Fame career with the San Francisco 49ers. And He was on the academic All-American team. I thought that was such a unique honor. Can you tell us, do we have such an academic All-American team in WIAA and in our jurisdiction? And how do we recognize those student athletes who are achieving well in the classroom?
Yeah, so we actually have an academic team award, an academic state champions for all of our sports and activities every season. And so what we do is athletic directors have a nomination process, or their admin secretaries or whoever it is from the school can submit that through a process through our website. And so they're able to do that. We have deadlines for when they have to be in, and they just take the team GPA for the kids that are on varsity, and they submit that in. So we honor academic state champions at all of our state championship events. We try to do it at that particular event. If their teams have qualified, or if they have representatives there, then we really try to do that. Sometimes we may end up sending that plaque off to the school, and we might go out and do it at an assembly and recognize them at an assembly. And all of that actually gets incorporated into our Scholastic Cup at the end of the year. So we do points for teams that win each of our state championships at the team level, and then we actually give out points for the academic state champions, and we have a ranking system. So we keep those team standings, and you see the similar thing in college with the Capital One, I think is who sponsors that, but the scholarship cup that they have at the college level, it's the same idea and same philosophy. So that's one of the things that we do, and then each league has the opportunity, and so leagues will a lot of times have academic team champions and then academic individual champions for the individual sports.
You are with Juan Cotto, Rainier Avenue Radio host and personality on your community radio station, RainierAvenueRadio.world. You are with Justin Kesterson today, who is sitting in for Mick Hoffman, and he's obviously very capable. And just tremendous conversation we're having about eligibility and requirements for your student athletes on your community radio station, RainierAvenueRadio.world. Tony B just goes floating through you would think he was someone who came here to see the art exhibits. But Tony B of RainierAvenueRadio.world floating through the studio today, and hope he's having a great day and hope he's enjoying some sunshine, Tony B, as we are talking about important issues for our kids in our community. What measures are in place to monitor, support the academic progress of student athletes? How do the kids work with the register and all of the academic team to make sure that they are getting through their academic progress and understanding where they are in that, so they remain not only eligible, but are pushing towards their high school curriculum?
Yeah, and so we've touched on it a little bit, right? Is just that grade check process. The schools that have to have a grade check process for checking grades. And again, some schools do it every week. Some schools do it every other week. It depends on, that's up to them. We just say that they have to have a regular grade monitoring system. And that might look differently within schools. We used to give slips out to every student athlete. You got to go get this, fill it out by your teachers, bring it back in, and we'll calculate your grades for you. And that's how we checked them at IE. Other schools just run it straight off of their grade books, and they check it that way. But it takes an entire team effort to make sure that the kids stay academically eligible. It just takes the kid, it takes their family, it takes the athletic director and their admin secretaries if they have one. If they're fortunate enough to have one, then they're also helping out with that. But it also takes the work of the counselors to making sure, if this kid is slipping in the class, working with the counselor and the teacher, okay, like what's going on? Like, are there underlying issues as to why the kid's struggling, or is it just the fact that they're not grasping the concept of what the teacher's going over, or maybe it's a discovery of a learning disability, and making sure that the kid has those academic supports to help them through, or maybe it might be something that is needing to be followed up in a 504 or an IEP that they might have going on. So it's all of that wrapped into it, but it really starts with that grade check and that grade monitoring process to make sure that the kids are staying up on their academics.
Justin, what can the coaches do to support it? I mean, it's such an interesting relationship. I coach the team. I've had students tell me the only reason why you're interested in me is because I'm participating in the sport. And I'm like, the only reason why we have this relationship is you're participating in the sport. There's other students in the building that I don't have a relationship with simply because they're not participating in the sport and I'm not a teacher here. Right. So of course I'm going to be interested because you're participating in the sport. I've had parents who said the same, these obtuse things to me. And then I've also had educators come and tell me, well, why does he get special? Why are you so interested in his grades? Or is it just because you want them to be eligible? I said, well, yes, I would love to have him be eligible for the game, but I would also like to have him eligible for the rest of his life too. And I think it is such a unique relationship because it's such a positive relationship, positive, a win-win. I mean, if you're academically eligible, you get to participate. If you get to participate, hopefully you'll be able to support us and help the team. And usually in my coaching situations, that went hand in hand. At times, it seems like it can be difficult. What can coaches do you think, to enhance the relationship between the student, the educator, and the parent, which I think is a unique triangle?
Yeah, I mean, obviously athletics is that carrot, right, for the kid to continue to do well in school. And so I think that, looking back as an athletic director, it's that conversation when you're having your parent meeting before the season starts, right, and setting those expectations of like, this is what we're going to require as an athletic program. Having that conversation, though, with your coaches about, here's the expectations we're going to have as an athletic program, an entire department, not just your specific sport. And then allowing those coaches to kind of develop their own philosophies and their own standards of what they're going to do, but making sure that you're all on the same page, right? The last thing you want to do is have a coach that says they're going to have a 3.0 standard. Everybody else is carrying a 2.0 standard. Right. And then all of a sudden mom and dad want to know, or, who have you want to know why their son or their daughter is being held to a higher standard than everybody else, right? So you have to have that communication. But then as the athletic director, that's your opportunity. And if you're a coach that's actually on staff, right, that conversation can happen in those staff meetings and forging those relationships. So I think it becomes important to outline what your philosophy is from an athletic department standpoint, and as a coach to the teaching staff, so that they understand what the expectations are. We're going to hold every kid accountable. Every kid is going to have the same expectations. Once you start to go down the road of having your favorites, right, that's where that creates that ambiguity. And then teachers start to question, well, why are you so interested in this kid and not this kid? This kid's failing just as much as this kid. So you walk that delicate line. So as long as you hold true to your philosophy and your kind of your morals and your ethics on that, then that helps with that relationship.
It's really interesting. When I was at Highline High School, I was coming out of a Mariners game one night, and had a young man approach me. We went to Mount Rainier, and the young man said to me, "You're bleeping Cotto," and he sure didn't say bleeping. He said, "You're," and I said, "I am." And he goes, "Yeah, you coach my friends, this guy at Highline." I go, "Yeah." He goes, "We went to such and such school together. I was at Mount Rainier." And he goes, "Can I ask you a question?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Why were we all flunking?" And I thought that was a really interesting question, and I told him, certainly some of that was how you were prepared in your early years. Some of it you may have been socially promoted. But, I made it real clear that I had a standard with my guys. And I said, yeah, I'm sure you probably know, we got in some fights about it, but, I think they're all laughing to the bank right now. And he got a kick out of that. What is it? How do coaches really maintain that relationship with the kids and really want to make sure that they're projecting it? Like you said, it has to be a part of a coach's philosophy.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about how you come at it and how you build that relationship. I mean, I've seen really strong coaches with really bad teams, right? But they've got a great culture and they've got a great community. And I've seen some really good coaches with some really talented teams that are just complete messes that have fallen apart because they don't have the same standards for everybody, right? You get that one-star athlete or a couple star athletes, and they've got that special treatment, right? And they're not holding it. So it really comes down to holding that line on, here's what the philosophy is, and this is how we're gonna act, this is how we're gonna behave, this is how we're gonna carry ourselves, and setting that up, but also knowing that you need to have the flexibility on how to reach the kids. You got to be adaptable to be able to coach them. And kids today in today's world have all these different pressures, all these different things that I didn't have, and I'm almost 40 now, and so going back 20 years ago, right, when I was in high school, that's totally different than what these kids experience today. And as a coach, you've got to understand how to adapt. And so that's why, I give credit to a lot of coaches that have been around for 40 plus years and that they've been able to stay in it and that they still find success, and that are still growing, helping raise young men and women, because they've been able to change. They've been able to adapt to the changing cultures and being able to reach those kids, even though the lifestyles, the choices that they make, and the opportunities of choices that they have in front of them have changed and have grown compared to even when I was in high school. So it really just comes down to that standard of like, what are you going to do? How are you going to hold them accountable? And how are you going to do that fairly and equally among all your kids?
It's interesting. I was watching an interview with, oddly enough, Elon Musk. And he was talking about the span of time, and he was talking basically about the fact that, there is a band between 25 and maybe 50 to 55. Yeah. And that is where really all of the creative and dynamic energy is happening. And he unfortunately pointed to American politics, but there's other standards that you can look at where you may have people who are a little bit outside of that age range, and sometimes they do lose the connection with that middle core. And I felt when I was coaching, I was taking some of the things that I was taught, but those coaches were used to, and they came from a different environment. Mm-hmm. Where their coaches had coached, and they had come out of World War II, and it was this real harsh type of critical nature. And I felt towards at the end of my coaching career, I finally took my own personality and made it my own, and I was able to connect with those kids. But you're absolutely right. I think that, and even from the time when you were and a young guy like you, it wasn't that long ago. And for me, it was obviously 40 years ago, but the bands certainly have changed, and how you deal with the kids. We talk about being old school. It's not old school. Really, the kids are motivated, but you just have to connect within that band to help them with their motivations.
Yeah, you kind of have to find that trigger, like what motivates them. Like, and each kid's going to be, different. And I'm going through that right with my own kid right now, 8 years old, playing on the baseball team, and then what motivates him and what drives him is different from his other friends on the team. And so you got to figure out, okay, what is it that's going to make this fun for you and make you want to excel at this? And the same holds true with middle school and high school sports right now. Like, you've got to find that thing that has them there. Like, why are they there? Are they there just to have fun, or are they there to compete and get better? And then kind of balancing that out and knowing how to push this kid and how to push this kid, because they're not going to be the same. And that's tough to do when you're talking about a football team that might have 80 to over 100 kids on it versus a basketball team where you're focused on maybe 15 kids at most, right, on a varsity roster. So, it's a delicate balance for sure.
What has changed since the pandemic?
A lot. I would say that no doesn't mean no anymore. I think I'm famous now for saying that in a lot of the conversations I have. I think, trying to get people to understand that we have rules and regulations for high school and middle school athletics in the state of Washington. And it's when we tell folks no, this is what the rule is, they don't always hear no, they hear, okay, what about this? Or that's a maybe, or things like that. So that's probably been the biggest challenge. And I think our schools see that every day. That a lot, you look at school board votes and things like that have gone on across the state in the last number of years. And I think that's been the biggest thing. I think the other part is within the eligibility process has really just been the differences in education, the opportunities that exist now for kids to access their education through homeschool, through alternative public schools, through online alternative school education, private school education, the way public school education has shifted and changed. All of those things wrapped in have been a drastic change and made us kind of rethink a lot of our eligibility rules, because traditional families are not the norm anymore, right? We have to look at what is a family unit nowadays too. And that's really changed, I think, since the pandemic.
How is this device here in regards to social media? How do you feel that has impacted our students, and has it changed the personalities? I mean, when I was joking with my son. When I first was a junior and senior in high school, we had the Walkmans. Yeah. And that was the first time where, you first had the little transistor radio and you had a little earbud in your ear. But when you had the Walkmans, you were totally, completely separated from whoever you were around. Yeah. How has social media changed, do you think, this whole conversation?
Yeah, it's drastic, right? Because from the everyday life, right? You've got kids that are on there, and you see the bullying that goes on, and how that affects the school day, and how that can potentially affect the eligibility process, right? Hardships due to harassment, intimidation, and bullying that we see quite a bit of, and a lot of it's not so much in person anymore. It's the stuff that happens online, and online hazing and bullying that takes place, and so that's changed a lot over the years. Obviously, everything's videotaped. Everything's kind of out there for people to see. I think that it has led to, I mean, we get notifications from people about illegal recruiting, right? Like, look at what this person posted. And so those things are out there. So that's really changed. I think that it used to be a little bit more difficult to see the kind of the intent of transferring for athletic purposes. Now that's a little bit more out there because people are a little bit more blatant with it. And I think that the way the transfer portal has transpired in college athletics has kind of led some people to think it's kind of the same process in high school, and it's not. We don't have that at the high school level, and so high school is about competing. Really at its core is about competing for your community, school, and where it's at, but also realizing that that's changed over the course of the last couple of years since the pandemic, and school choice is a big thing. And we're navigating that now, and we've got some transfer rules that are being looked at from a committee. We're doing a lot of work around that and considering some changes to the transfer policy. Yeah.
Justin, thank you so much for spending your time with us today. We appreciate obviously, it's wonderful that Mick comes down. It's so wonderful when you all come down, and it's always great to have you because you were so articulate and so thoughtful on the things that are affecting our kids today. For Rainier Avenue Radio, I'm Juan Cotto saying have a great week. Son, let's go Seattle Mariners Thursday night, first of 162, and let's have a great day, and we will see you all next week on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.